to what I have to say. I've been here 33 years. I have run 51 separate programs in 31 years. Only 2 of those were NSF programs, and I wasn't the PI on either one of those. So I haven't touched NSF to the 10th pole. The odds there are worse. And playing in this arena is very different than the NSF arena. And I would say that not everybody can follow what I'm going to suggest. You have to turn into a version that's compatible with your own personalities. But I would say the biggest barrier to this is the same one if you've ever sold Girl Scout cookies, band candy, sought religious converts, or any other door-to-door thing. If you've done that, you know that if you quit when the first door is closed in your face, you will never sell any band candy or anything else. And I know that even my friends at very elite schools get rudely and insultingly rebuffed in their proposal process. And one of the things my suggested thing involves is cold calling and making yourself known at these agencies, which is critical.
You can do it from there. It's the area.
Okay. So when I was getting tenure, it was all about publish or perish. Now it's basically get funded or get out. So it's not like if you can get funding, if you want to stay here, you have to. So you have to be tough because you're going to get rejected no matter who you are or what school you come from. So 6 out of 7 proposals fail. Maybe more than that. Some NSF things, 19 out of 20. If you have to live with these odds, it's going to be rough because you're going to be writing a zillion proposals and only a few of them are going to succeed. So my goal from the beginning was to try to win half the time. And by doing the things that I'm describing, I've been able to more or less do that. Not quite, but not worse than a third of the time. So how do you do that with these non-NSF type agencies? And half of the thing about improving your odds is not writing the proposal when you have no chance. And I'm going to show you things about how you can find out when you have no chance that you might not have known, and it'll save you a lot of time. Because in my experience, it takes me 2 man-months of my discretionary time to write a good proposal. So if all you did was that, you could write 6 proposals a year, and you wouldn't even necessarily win 1 year doing that. Then you need to have the right stuff in the proposal, and the proposal has to be simple enough, and it's a sales document. And you got to visualize who's reading it. It's some professor like me who got a pile this big, who's already working 60 hours a week and wants to kill them off as fast as he can. Maybe only read the abstract. So if your sales pitch is not clear and reiterated from the abstract to the summary, you're very likely to never even get your thing read in its entirety. So these are the 3 things I'm going to put some flash on the bones of. So here's a not widely known fact. If you send a proposal to NASA or ONR or any of these places that they cannot fund, that are not interested in funding, it's not just neutral. It's bad because the government, the legislature wanted fair consideration to do any favoritism. So every single unsolicited proposal they get, even if they 100% know they can't fund it when they read the title, they still have to do about a day's of paperwork on it. So you're not going to endear yourself to the guys at the funding agencies who have a lot of sway over your proposals. You start sending them lots of stuff that they're not interested in. If you want to not do this, you have to talk to them and you have to know what's going on. Otherwise, you're playing in a rigged game that's rigged against you. So, connect to their mission. So, let me tell you one story about this from my own past. There was a guy at AFOSI named George Haritos. And every year I would call him up. And every time I called him up, I would use my hors d'oeuvre plate at the wedding approach. So before I call him up, I'd think of 3 related things that I thought I could pitch to him over the phone. And I had all the the details worked out in my head, even written down. And I'd call them up, and I'd say, oh yeah, you guys are at the Air Force, and I work in this general area. And maybe I would ask him what he was interested in. And then, when I heard what he had to say, I'd pull out which one of these three was the closest to what he said, and I'd start telling him about it. And when I do that, I can get a variety of reactions. I called this one guy up at O&R once, and he basically told me that since I wasn't from MIT, Harvard, or Yale, he didn't even want to talk to me. So that saved me from wasting my time writing proposals to him. And with George Chiritos, I called him up every year for approximately 6 years. Each time I talked to him, I found out that at this particular time, they're really only interested in this niche thing or that niche thing that didn't include what I was doing. So I didn't write the proposal. In the 6th year, I called him up, and I told him something I was doing, and he was really excited about it. I wrote one proposal, and I got one program. So you got to call it, and when you do this, the door's going to be slammed in your face sometimes, but most of the time it's not, because they don't want you to send proposals that they don't want. So they want you to know what it is they're interested in, so you won't send them stuff that they're not interested in. And they're really in the business of trying to get the best performance they can for their money. So the more people they have who are vying for it, the better the chances. That's their job. So when you're calling them up, you're not stepping out of line. Unless if these people take their job seriously and they're doing it right, they should want to talk to you at least for a little while. At least partly because they don't want to talk. So I'll expand on this one in a second. Now, and actually these two are related. One of the best things you can do is get invited to a kickoff meeting for a named program. For instance, currently I get funding out of the university's Turbine Systems program. And they have annual meetings, and you can go to those. Even if you're not funded, you have to pay your own travel. But you'll find out exactly what they're looking for in terms of the end game and plan. And the best version of this that I ever did was when I was a consultant at Pratt Whitney. The NASA guys came, and they asked me as the industry guy what I thought they should do. So then I was creating the suggested program that I was then later on writing a proposal to. Or, if you can be the guy like Tony Evans at UCSB, used to be the guy who would run the thematic meeting to help the Air Force collect all the stuff about what should be done, then you're really in taxation for that. So, you've got to call them. I started out, some people say, oh yeah, I work good old just friends. I have about the same number of friends as anybody else. My cold calls. And I got the door slammed in my face a few times, but quite a few other times I went to programs. If you don't know specifically what these kind of people want, and you can't connect it to their mission. So let's say you were doing the right thing. You wanted to do fracture mechanics, but you didn't know how it connected to the Navy's interest in aging aircraft. And you don't put aging aircraft in your proposal. End of game. You've got to know what's going on here. So here's my example. I used to get money from this program in the late 80s. They would make up a program plan that says, we need research on this, we need research this, and this. I go to the kickoff meeting and I found out Professor X has already got the money for this program, and Professor Y has already got money for that program. So if I write either of these two proposals, my chances of success are exactly mathematically 0. So I go after one of these. I went after this one. I found out there was 2 parallel programs. I knew they had a program in this. I knew why they had a program in this. I knew what materials they were interested in. I could write the proposal right at the bullseye what they wanted. And I just had to beat the other people who were going for the bullseye. So if you don't have the knowledge, now when you make these calls, there's 3 kinds of reactions. There's the hell no reaction, since I wasn't from Princeton. And then there's, yeah, I'm really interested in that reaction. And then there's, Yeah, well, we're looking at everybody's. Don't write the hell no proposal. And if you have a yes encouraging one, write that one first. I'd also write them on the neutral ones if you don't have too much work already to do and you're a young guy and you're gonna try to do it. But just don't write in the zero probability ones. It's just crazy. So what do you need to have in the proposal? These agencies are mission driven. So if you can connect with something that proves that you're really mission connected, and that's what you want to do. So if you're working on industrial gas turbines, and you can get an industrial gas turbine company to write a letter of support, or even more sincere for them to give you free test samples or money, that puts you way ahead because that legitimizes you as working on the right stuff. When I used to get my UTSF program, I had an industrial consortium of 5 companies putting in $10,000 a year each. That increases the chances of winning tremendously if you put that together. If you get a national lab who's going to do a bunch of stuff on specialized instrumentation at no cost, that legitimizes you too. And that's all. And both of these things are bang for the buck things. So if you get the companies putting in money, the national lab putting in time, the program manager wants to walk around and puff up his chest and say, look what I did with my money. And if he's getting leverage because there's money coming from here and money coming from there, that's a huge plus. So when you write your proposal, if you have that, you got to put it right in the abstract and in the summary and everywhere else, because that's one of your strengths. Usually you need some original ideas. If you have a special experimental setup that's perfectly matched to what you're doing, that can be a big thing. Or you can get this through the national lab. And then they're going to look at who you are and how you did the last time they gave you money. And if you're a young person, maybe you don't have a big publication record, but that's what you're building to make this work. So when you write this proposal, this stuff has to be really easy to find. And the more technical detail you vary in, the less easy it is to find, the less likely it is to be successful. I think of technical detail like Arnold Schwarzenegger in a movie. He just wears a golf shirt so you can see his big muscle, but he doesn't have to take his shirt off and show you everything. You're just showing enough technical detail to credential yourself that you're the real thing without overdoing it. So you overdo the technical detail. The important things, the big things you want, because when the person's done reading your proposal, they may be able to say 5 or 6 sentences in their head about what they just read, and it's not going to be all the details. They're going to be saying to themselves, oh yeah, he's going to do X, it would be good because of reason Y, and he showed me enough stuff that he's the real deal. That's it. That's all they're going to have. So you got to focus on making sure you control what that dialogue is that they say in those 6 sentences after they read the proposal. Don't bury that stuff. So this is what I say, run the thematic conference. So, in my opinion, if you're selling, you don't want to have more than about 5 points that you're selling. You know, you're saying, oh, I got Oak Ridge National Lab, and they're going to do $500,000 worth of stuff. And I have this cool original idea that nobody ever did before. And I got industrial money, whatever these 5 things are. They need to be in the abstract. They need to be reinforced in the body of the thing. They need to be in the summary. Know your audience. Okay. So here's the extreme of know your audience. Back in my early career, I had to write proposals to NASA. And the guy who was the program manager was named Gary Halford. And Gary Halford was the inventor of this thing called strain range partitioning, this academic thing. So you better not write a proposal that says, strain range partitioning is no damn good and we need to replace it by what I have. And I was very close to writing in that area. So I had to make sure that I paid homage to the right stuff because I knew I was going to read it. Now, you can't always get that kind of inside information, but I think the thing you know about all these audiences is every proposal reviewer is too busy trying to do it in a hurry. You're not going to draw the inferences that you want them to draw. You have to tell them it in your face. So if the end point of your thing is that the efficiency will be increased by 10%, that's the thing you want to say. Not let them put it together for themselves. And this is maybe my last one. I've been on the receiving end of reviewing proposals both for assistant professors here at UConn to help them, and also at the National Science Foundation and some Canadian organizations that do the same. Half the proposals I read, when I put them down, I say, what are they going to do, and why would it be good if they did it? Half of the proposals, I cannot answer that question after I read it. You could probably go back and read it 3 times and figure it out, but that's not happening. So a lot of times you're too close to it. You need somebody who doesn't know what you're thinking to read it and say, yeah, I understand why you're doing this and what's good about it. But you can ask it to yourself to start with. I'd say, if you can do this, you double your odds of winning already, because half the people that are proposing proposals don't accomplish that. All right, so now you get into this thing of how far you stretch it, right? So you want to make your outcome seem like it's going to be real good, right? So for me personally, I'm not going to say anything that I don't believe. Once you start down that road, there's no end to it. Instead, I describe the outcome as the best of what I could believe is actually possible, which might not happen because it's a research project. So that means you describe it in a very positive way. You don't write the summary and say, well, then if I finish this, I'll have a really accurate solution to the stresses in the turbine blade, unless this goes wrong, unless that goes wrong, and other things like that. You just tell it the way you wish it would be if it all worked, no more, no less. Because I think that when you write, there's a million ways to structure sentences, and what you actually feel in your gut, if you're any good at writing, comes out in writing. And if you don't believe it, then they don't believe it. So you have to believe what you're saying. If you can, you want to establish a niche. This is maybe like 10 years old. But they always have these meetings. These meetings I go to, they want the guy who's the expert on abrasive wear. And so they pick this guy, and everybody knows who's the guy who's the expert on abrasive wear. And they ask him to give the keynote speech and all that kind of stuff. So can you develop an identity associated with something you do? In my case right now, I'm a liquid precursor plasma spray guy. And I'm the thermal barrier coating guy. And that's one of the things you want to try to do over time. It's hard to play. It's a balancing act, because if you're playing one really narrow niche, and that goes out of fashion, and you spend the whole rest of your career getting $0. Some of my colleagues have done that. But if you get to going into 50,000 other things, you never do this guy. This is what I did for my career. But you're better off being X, the expert on X. And the other thing is, you look at the budgets and say, oh yeah, look, they got $25 million for XYZ in the Air Force. Because that's a 2 years old program you've already committed on it. And it wouldn't matter what you did, somebody else has already got it, and they're just funding the last year. And so on. The new money is what you want to fund. So, this is my heuristics. I shoot for 50% success. And I don't send proposals to places where I get really negative vibes off my phone calls. And I generally don't send them without the phone calls or attending the kickoff meetings or something. I have acceptance to that, especially when I have to sit somewhere to debate like in Bury or something. And then you have to do that during the proposal. But for the ordinary 1 and 2 investigative things, this has been my rules. And then simple sales pitch with these things in it, as many of them as you can. You don't always have all these things. make sure you can easily understand what's good about what you're going to do and what's good about it. And don't send a proposal to a thematic agency if they don't want it. It's not just neutral, it's bad. And so this gets into the selling candy thing. You make cold call. You go on the internet, you find out the programs, you call program managers, you find out how they react to you. You base your going forward on this. Not everybody has the personality or the courage to do this, but the advantage that you get from doing this is quite large. And the advantage the agency gets from you doing it is large too, because they don't have to read these proposals anymore. So that's in a nutshell how I got 51 wins. Anyone want to ask me anything about this?
Questions for Eric? Thank you, Eric. Questions? I have a question. How would you propose that the School of Engineering utilize some of your ideas and principles more systematically to reach a large group of our faculty? Has your ideas ever been implemented on a large scale within the school?
Well, we've written a few big proposals to get funded to involve 4 or 5 professors, but I don't think I've ever talked about this except in front of a handful of ME professors and selected young faculty that I decided to mentor. But,
so I think, the school is hiring, 20 new faculty next year.
Yeah, maybe I have a new faculty orientation or something, and they can listen to me.
So, some funding agencies, they solicit some proposal. So in that case also, you need to talk to them, right?
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. Here's what happens. Some of these places, there are all these rules about this. So a lot of these places have rules like this. Before the solicitation comes out, you can call up the people at the agency. You can talk freely with them, and they can tell you whatever they want. But once the solicitation is out, any question you have about the solicitation has to go in the public domain, because they don't want somebody giving them PAL insider information on it. So the timing of these unsolicited calls has to sort of lead the solicitation. And that's tricky to know. That's why you have to start out kind of a general discussion with these people. But hopefully what will happen is you call them up and say, well, I'm interested in X, Y, and Z. And they'll say, oh, for item Z, we're going to have a $10 million solicitation coming out in February. And we're looking for 10 programs of $1 million each in about 3 years' time. And by the way, that's the other thing you want to find out with this insider information. What's the financial scope of it? It's like when I write the UTSR proposals, I can see from the ones they've awarded in the past, and they always announce the total amount of thing, and they give an estimate of how many awards there are. If you divide one by the other, you know what's the ballpark of the financial thing you're shooting for. And if you're out of it by 50%, you're probably dead on arrival. That's part of the information you have to have. So when you read the solicitation, you go in there and say, oh yeah, $1 million over 3 years for 2 people. So that's $500K, it's $150 a year. If you come in at double that, you have no chance. So you got to have the discussion before the RFP comes out if you want the real inside scoop. And once the RFP comes out, you can get clarification. It all goes in the public domain, and a lot of times they won't answer your questions.
And is there anything about how many PIs or co-PIs would be better?
Well, more co-PIs is usually better than less, but it's all about what the financial scope can withstand. So it wouldn't make very much sense if you had 1 graduate student and 3 professors with a month's salary, summer salary each, because over supervision. So the things have to be in proportion. But if you have, in fact, this is a whole nother thing you have to decide for yourself. There's two ways you could operate. You could say, I'm not sharing my stuff with nobody. I know about this thing and I'm going to eat it all myself. Okay, that's savvy strategy A. And there are people around here who I could name, and that's what they do. And the other strategy is, I'm going to bring together the best people with the right knowledge to have the highest quality technical thing I can have. And I'm going to take advantage of the fact that if I'm successful enough, I'm going to have more programs than I can personally handle all at the same time. So that I can grow up to be almost infinite size. And I can tell you that when I had this program from DARPA, which was $1.5 million a year, if I didn't have all those other professors in there, I would have drowned in it. And it wouldn't have been fun. I mean, you could say, oh yeah, more money is better and better. It's not. Eventually, you get to the point where you're just shuffling papers and not sleeping. So my personal opinion is that leveraging yourself with other people, if the financial scope permits it, is the right thing to do. The other thing is, I also, when I was younger, I had the other experience, where there was this big solicitation. So I invited a number of prominent other professors to the table. And it was like, the way I described it was, I had a trough of cornmeal for the hogs, and I invited twice as many hogs to eat it as there was cornmeal. So each guy came in and he wanted like $1 zillion. He wasn't conservative at all. By the time I added it all together, and I was too young to tell someone to go away, I had a proposal that died under the financial weight of it before it even left my desk, and I wasted months on it. So you have to be judicious about this, and the thing that determines the size you want to go to is the money. Because if you invite big wheel Professor X, Y, and Z, and they all want $250K and we only got 300, just killed it and wasted a bunch of time too. So you have to do it judiciously, but I think, I mean, if you look at Wilson Chu, he has Aldo Paracchio, who's retired full-time employee from UTRC, and he works for him full-time, and he can manage twice as many programs as he could ever do himself. And when everybody counts up what he does, it's the same check mark as if the guy wasn't there, because he's the PI. So if you grow big, you want to do that, in my opinion. But some people just are not that way.
Any other questions for Eric? Okay, thank you, Eric. May generously joined us today, even though she's got a proposal due Wednesday.
Okay, I'll be quick. Okay, so basically Mike asked me to talk about the tips for writing an NIH grant. Actually, I'm still looking for tips for writing the grant. And actually recently, like, you know, the funding situation in NIH is not that good. So the percentage of proposals being funded about 5 to 6%, so it's really low. And so everyone is looking for tips. And here I just want to share a few things, like, you know, I learned during the process when I write my NIH grants. Hopefully it will be helpful to you guys. Okay, so basically I'll kind of like, you know, for writing grant, I kind of like summarize them into like, you know, all these 7 steps. And I will go through like each step with you and say like, you know, for each step, what kind of things I've learned, like in the process of writing grants. Hopefully that will be helpful to you. Okay. So the first one, like, you know, when you like, you know, want to apply for grant, definitely you want to see if you are qualified for the grant or not. So first of all, you have to have a great idea. And basically you should have an idea like, you know, it can convince yourself it's wonderful and it will sell. So basically you need to be a good salesman or sales lady for that. And so like, you know, if it's like an idea, even you can convince yourself, I think it's totally a waste of time. Even it's a novel, great idea, it may not sell, but like, you know, if it's a poor idea, I think you might want to save the time kind of like, you know, to generate more preliminary data and do something and do some, you know, wait for it to be mature and then kind of submit it. And then like once you have this idea, you have to see if it fit into the NIH or not. So basically, normally all the like health-related ideas will fit into NIH. So unlike like DoD or DOE, they will tell you like don't submit. Basically, most of the NIH program managers, they will tell you, yeah, please submit. Your idea is wonderful, but your wonderful idea may not be always kind of funded. So basically, they will invite you to submit. Even they will say like, oh, maybe not my program. Basically, in NIH, they have like about 27 like institutes or centers. So they will suggest you to go to other institutes. So like so basically, you need to kind of like after talk to the program director, you need to kind of choose which institute or even like study section later on. Like you need to kind of submit your grant, and also you need to decide what type of support you want to go for. So that's kind of largely depend on how much kind of like preliminary data you have and what stage you are. So you kind of like you can apply for R1 that requires quite a lot of preliminary data, and R21 so requires less preliminary data. Actually, in the description they will say, oh, even you don't have kind of like preliminary data, it's okay. Don't believe that. It doesn't work that way. So you always need to have preliminary data, otherwise it won't fly. And also R03 is much smaller kind of range. And then like they have T grants, and then they have F grants, like different kind of training grants and fellowship grants. So always worthwhile to contact the NIH program directors or give them, send them an email or call them. And then like, so also you want to talk to some senior faculty in your department or other departments to kind of like run through your idea and to see if they also think it's a wonderful idea to go for that. And also there are some specific kind of a program, they only kind of like for like new investigators. So basically they are like, in NICF they kind of, NIH, they kind of define new and early stage investigators. For new investigator, basically for people who has never, like, never got a R1 grant, they will call like new investigator. In that case, it doesn't matter you are full professor, associate professor, you still have that kind of like you still can be called new investigator. But for early stage investigator, normally they count. I think it's 10 years after you get your PhD degree. So in that case, the good thing for the new and early stage investigator, basically like, for R1, say if their cut is 6%, but for new and like early stage investigator, like the cutoff can be like 11%. So you can get 5% or 4% more. So you get kind of more room to play. But it doesn't mean like that 5% is like, if your grant is not good, so the 5%, it doesn't make any difference. So basically, like, still we need to have a great idea to start with. And for these two, basically, that's for early stage investigators, maybe. And so it's a K99 and R00, basically it's for like people used to be a postdoc and transition to a transition from a training kind of position to a faculty position. And in that case, like the pool of the people is much smaller and the computation is less. And there is another grant called NIH Director's New Innovator kind of award. In this case, for people who has got a degree, like PhD degree, last degree, less than 10 years, they can apply for that. And for senior people, they can compete. So in that case, the pool will be smaller, and but still, it's kind of very competitive for these two. And also, like, when you choose like different institutes, another thing can kind of like bear in mind is like the pay line. So for different institutions, they have different pay lines. So if you happens like, for your kind of project, it fits into a few institutions, then in that case, you can find one institution whose pay line is relatively higher. So in that case, maybe like your chance to get the grant will be higher. In this case, for the R1, like for the senior investigators, their chance is 6%. And for new investigators, they have like 10% chance. So basically, they give them more room to. But the 4%, sometimes it doesn't help.
What's like the writing?
Which one?
You have R03, small.
Yeah, R3 basically.
How much money is small?
R3 basically 50,000. That's the direct cost. So basically for NIH, it divided direct and indirect. So indirect is separate.
And that's
so,
a 1 year thing?
That's, I think, can be 2 years. And sometimes, if it's solicited, it can be 3 years. So in that case, it's like a year, like about 75,000. So that's not, it's okay, yeah. So
so it's 50K a year for 1 to 3 years.
No, 50K a year, then each year you get 50K. So basically 3 years. So that's
so
not
it's
bad.
150 in
Yeah,
3
150
years plus overhead.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's
that's
really actually like
that's not bad.
225.
Exactly, that's not bad. And for R21 is so I think including indirect, direct, it's 2 years, like about 400,000 each. So, and R01 is 1.2, 1.5 million. So it's kind of, we talk about, compared to NSF, we talk about big ones. Yeah. Even for the small ones, like R21, for NSF still, it's a reasonable size because it's only 2 years. And so for the funding kind of mechanisms for NIH, basically, most of the grants are unsolicited. It's about 80%, and the solicited grants, only about 20%. But pay attention to these grants. So that's kind of targeted to a small pool of people. So in that case, maybe the chance is higher. But most of the people would go for the unsolicited grants. And it's about 3 cycles a year. So in that case, it's 3 cycles a year. You can go to this website and find the due dates, and then it's cycle 1 normally is in February or March, and cycle 2 is in June or July, and cycle 3 is in October or November. So basically, if you are doing renewal or resubmission, you have 1 month more time, extra time to write your grant. Normally, each grant you are allowed to submit twice, and then so you're not once second chance. If you don't get found the second time, you have to totally rewrite your grant. And also that's basically the funding kind of time, the timeline for cycle 1 and cycle 2 and cycle 3. So they will kind of send you the information when the scientific merit kind of review will start, when the advisory council round will start, and when the project will be funded. So basically, they will send you this information through the e-comments, and you will get notification for that. And so, once you decide, your idea is truly wonderful, and you want to kind of submit a grant, so basically you need to plan very carefully. So it will kind of stay in your niche, like Eric mentioned that early on. And so in this case, it would kind of a good chance to test you if you are a good salesman or not. So you need to address the significance of your grant, the high impact. You will talk about how many lives you will save and what kind of gaps you can bridge. And so basically, how you can kind of your knowledge, will help the whole community, advance the knowledge of the community, and so on and so forth. So basically, all these things, the high impacts, the significance, you need to kind of put in front. And then you don't want the reviewers have to kind of look around to find these things. So basically, you need to kind of hit in front, and then they will know what you're talking about. And also specific aims. So basically, you need to have specific aims, and it's unlike NSF proposal. For NIH proposal, normally you look for a central hypothesis, and then you need to kind of test your central hypothesis. And then during the kind of process, you also need to normally you will kind of come out with the outline, kind of write down what kind of specific aims, what's the central hypothesis, how do you kind of and conduct the experiment to kind of test your hypothesis. And then during this process, you will think about, can I do it by myself? And most occasions, it's a joint kind of grant, so you will think what kind of expertise I will need, whom I should look for collaboration, and then you will need to look for expertise, collaborators, and also you need to see if you have all the facilities to conduct the research, and do you need to collaborate with people from outside the university or like national labs, and they have the facility to help you to kind of like, make the grant better. And of course, it's nice to contact some big names. If they can be on board of your grant, certainly we kind of add the credit to that. But as Eric mentioned early on, you have to consider about the budget. So you need to kind of put in front, talk about the money to them, and to see like, I can give you this much money, is that okay with you? So basically, instead like at the end, like, squeeze down, like you are just writing the grant, kind of do a service job for others, and you don't have much money. So basically you want to kind of like put in front, say, hey, I have this much money for you. Do you want to kind of like on board of my grant? And then make it clear so you don't have conflict in later on. And the most important part is like you need to have enough preliminary data. So if you don't have the preliminary data, forget it. And also you need to know well about the literature, you need to know the controversy, you need to know the gaps. Okay. So then like, once you get all these things sorted out, you start to kind of prepare for your grant. So basically, like, my suggestion is like, prepare your grant early and don't rush. So especially when you collaborate with others, so like if you are the PI, so like maybe you will spend like 80% or 70% of your time writing your grant. That's your first priority, but it may not be the first priority of your co-PI because he may or she may have other grants to write. So in that case, plan ahead, give them enough time. And for the NIH grant, we kind of submit through grant.gov, so you need to familiar with the grant.gov and familiarize with the modular budget. And you need to kind of like, and also if you have the annual protocols, you need to have the annual protocol in pending. It's not necessary to be proved at the stage when you submit it. When you get award, you have to kind of get the annual protocol kind of like proved. Otherwise, you won't get award. So basically, like before getting award, they will kind of clarify with all these items with you.
Just to mention one thing there.
Yeah.
At NSF, most of these agencies, and probably NIH, you go over the page limit or violate some of the thing, it goes right in the garbage immediately. And the whole thing you did is wasted. So don't think you could get about 21.5 pages if they say 20. Because they have a file this big. And they know it's going to take a long time, and it makes them very happy to say, oh, we could throw this one away right rid of it. You have to follow the format and you're dead on.
Yeah. So basically, you need to kind of like go through the page limit and the required documents, the format, everything very carefully. So otherwise, like if you do it wrong, basically you're out. And later on, we'll talk about like, normally I suggest like you submit a bit early. So like, for the e-comments, they will give you the error, give you 2 days like error window. And then you see the error, you can fix it. But if you submit, say today, the deadline, submit today, basically once the error comes out, you're dead. That's it. So, but for I think NSF, we don't have the kind of like the flexibility to do the 2 days. But for NIH, actually you can fix it, like but small errors normally. And when you write a proposal, so basically you don't know who will be your reviewers. So try to cite, if it's a controversy topic, try to cite like the publications from both camps. Otherwise, when people from one camp will be pretty upset with you. And then like, so basically you need to kind of like, provide a timeline. And then like, for when you write the like, NIH grant, so normally we'll talk about like for your AIM-1, like, how long it will take and when will you migrate to AIM-2 and when will you kind of like move to AIM-3. And be very focused. So a couple of times my grant got commented, it's like, you're too ambitious. So lots of us, I think, we have so many ideas and we want to put all the good stuff into one proposal, just like to show them how wonderful we are. But actually, like, if you have like many kind of like specific aims, you are inviting criticism from the kind of reviewers. Basically give them more chance to criticize you. Like, you can't be kind of cover all your waterfront if you have like 5 aims or 6 aims. So try to kind of like come down to like 2 aims or 3 aims so you can focus on those things and then you can do well. And also try to avoid sub-aims. Like, you have so many aims that basically people will lose focus, don't know what you're trying to say. So kind of try to focus on, like, the point, what you want to sell, and sell it well. Okay, so I mentioned early on, so basically, like, significance, impact, and novelty, you need to kind of like clearly indicate in your proposal. So basically you help the reviewers like say, hey, they are here. So you don't need to look around in my proposal and to find out. So basically you can say like, if it's successful for this kind of like application, I can save how many lives, and then this technology will totally advance like this field. All these things you need to put in front. And then if you have some kind of like, something absolutely novel has been patented, so on and so forth, so you need to mention in your proposal. So basically tell people like, you have a space there, it's absolutely novel. And basically you don't want the reviewers like, kind of looking around your proposal, I don't know what to try to say, so kind of like, focus on those areas. And also for NIH kind of proposal, you have one area, normally you would discuss the problems, potential problems, and pitfalls. So basically you have, say, like that's your experiment design, and you have to kind of aware if it doesn't go right, what kind of will go wrong, and then what's your alternative approach. You won't just say like, this is my aim 1, and after I finish aim 1, I'll go aim 2, and after aim 2, I will go to aim 3. So if it doesn't work out, what will you do? What's your backup plan? So you need to kind of give out. Like if aim 1, like, that's what I plan to do, but if it doesn't work out, then basically that's my backup plan. You need to kind of make sure, like, all these things. And at least people know, like, like the potentials, what kind of things will potentially go wrong, and then you know how to address them, okay? And so sometimes I just came back from an NIH panel last week, and sometimes you see the typos, and you just feel they are so sloppy. And then, like, it's immediately kind of just impact on your kind of grading on them, and just say, that's a bad one. And so basically, like, definitely you want to proofread it. So that's like, come back to the point, like, prepare early, start early, so you don't need to rush. But occasionally it happens to us if 5 o'clock is the due date, we kind of try to finish 4:45, but don't do that often, otherwise, you have the typo there and definitely kind of like, cause problem. Another thing is abbreviations. Like many of us, we like to use abbreviations, but the thing is, like, you need to kind of mention a few times to kind of like spread it out. At least, like, don't assume the knowledge the reviewers should know. Like, it's so common, everyone should know this. It doesn't happen all the time, and the reviewers can get pretty frustrated about that. And if you start early, you will have time to revisit your grant. And sometimes, during your, when you revisit, you will find something. Gosh, why did I say that? And there might be a better way to write it. Okay, so if you can, and find somebody else to read your grant for you, but so don't feel offended if someone tell you, this is not good, that's not good. Actually, you don't want to hear is like people will tell you, gee, your grant is absolutely wonderful. It may not be the case. Okay, and then submit your grant. So now you need to submit through the grant.gov. So you need to leave a few days for OSP to review and submit your grant. So actually, I mentioned earlier, you need to, if you can, submit 2 days in advance. So in that case, it will allow you time to fix your errors. Otherwise, like, if something goes wrong, that's it, okay? And also, it will be a good thing to include a cover letter. So in the cover letter, if normally you can kind of like, tell the agents, say like, what's the highlight of your proposal, what's the novelty of your proposal, and also you can request where they, transfer your grant to, so which one they should assign your grant to, like which institution and which study section, if you know. And sometimes like later materials can be submitted later on, but that's kind of for specific kind of like occasions. Like, for revised budget, sometimes you can kind of submit a revised budget, but that's kind of for specific situations, like, if you require for equipment and then the institution already bought the equipment, so in that case you want to revise your budget. And also for the cases, like if you move from one institute to another, you can kind of ask for late material. And also, like if you have an article kind of like published in Science or Nature, you want the program manager to know, so you can kind of tell them the news. But normally they don't want you to send them the whole article. It's too much for them. Okay. And assignment and review. So normally assignment is like, they will kind of send you a notice through e-comments and tell you like, your proposal has been kind of assigned to a certain institute and a certain study section. So in that case, like, you will kind of have a look to see if the study section or the institute, is, especially the study section they're assigned to, is that appropriate to review your kind of like a proposal. Do they have the expertise to do that? So normally, like about 30 days before the review meeting, you can check the roster, and they will kind of like, sometimes they will list all the people's names, say like who will be in the review committee. So you can kind of check these people to see if they are expertise in your field. If not, maybe you can call the scientific review officer to discuss this and to tell them like, maybe this is the wrong place to submit your grant. And it's always better to reassign than like, just review as it is. So you will get pretty poor score in that case. And for the application process, normally like after you submit it through the grant.gov and NIH Center for like, scientific reviews will start to kind of like, to get your grant, and they will kind of like, transfer that to the scientific review officers or institute referral officers. And the scientific review officers, they will be kind of responsible for like application reviews and then the summary statement. And then they will forward your grant to the program director. And the program director normally is in charge of the scientific part and the technology part. And then finally, your grant will get awarded. So if not funded, it's pretty common. So don't feel too bad about that. And for this part, normally, like, they will give you scores. Normally, score is from 1 to 9, and the lower, the better. If you get 01, definitely you will fund it. If you get 09, you're out. And so basically, you need to go through it very carefully. The reason you need to go through it carefully, basically, it will help you to determine if you will resubmit it or you will just trash it. And so normally, if you have a score, and then like, you will feel like you should resubmit it. And also you need to go through the critics and to see like, all these critics, like, can you address them? If you feel something is totally fatal, you cannot address at all. So maybe that would kind of like make you feel like you should maybe not kind of resubmit. Because like, more likely, all this kind of like when you resubmit the grant, it will go back to the same reviews. And if you don't address their comments, and they will feel like offended. And even like, when you resubmit it, even they change the reviews, and normally like, they will give the new review like the previous comments, and they will compare notes to see if you address the, like, the comments kind of carefully or not. So in that case, basically, you need to kind of address the comments very, very carefully. So if you decide, like, the grant is still pretty nice, I need to resubmit it. So you can talk to your kind of program director for advices to see what else, like, it's kind of like read between lines, or some other advice you can pick from them. But definitely you need to address this very carefully. So for NIH, there's one page you can address these things. So you need to kind of address item by item, kind of like, say like, why, so what their comment, like, so basically very carefully address everything.
Have you ever had it where one reviewer says, that was bad, the other reviewer said, I really liked that part? I mean, sometimes they conflict.
Happens in NSF, but normally
not as much.
Not much in NIH, I would say, not much in NIH. Yeah. So, yeah. And then, like, so basically, if you found it, I would suggest you to talk to your program director at least once a year to discuss your progress. They know you are still there, you are still working hard, you still kind of make progress. And then like for most of the fundings, you can have 1 year no cost extension. And also like, keep in contact with the program manager, basically like, afterwards, if you make good progress, you can apply for renewal. So basically for renewal, the big thing is like you need to have a long list of like what kind of good things you have done, what kind of achievement you have done, and then that make kind of possible for you to renew the application. But renewal application basically is assessed like a new grant, the same, like just like you have 1 month's time, 1 more month. So basically normally like, for the cycle, say June cycle is for new grant, a July cycle will be for the renewal application. And then you can kind of mention about all the good things you did for the previous grant that will kind of earn some credit for you to kind of increase your chance to get funded for the like renewal grant. Okay, that's all like, I want to talk about. Okay, questions?
Questions for May? How helpful is it talking to the program director? I know you mentioned it, you said they always almost encourage you to submit.
So far, none of them tell me like don't submit it.
Okay.
But certainly, not all the grants I submitted got funded. So I feel like, since
Do they ever discourage you?
No, they always say like, yeah, so normally you read their announcement and you see if you fit or not, and then you talk to them, and it seems like they always just say, like, yeah, sure, submit it, why not? But you don't get funded all the time.
Let's thank May for her presentation. So it'll be interesting to hear what Manos has to say to the same question. Eric said, if they discourage you, don't submit. May said they got discouraged, and but they don't discourage. They always tell you to submit.
I just wanted to start by saying I personally also don't get too much funding from NSF. My primary support comes from mission-oriented agencies, NASA, NOAA, International. Actually, I have some facts in the next slide to show you why bother NSF, right? I tell you why. It was said by Eric, or actually everyone agrees that to go to a mission-oriented agency, even NIH, somehow you got to talk to the program officer because they have a mission. And if your research doesn't fit exactly to that mission, if they don't know you, you don't have a chance, right? Well, with NSF, the good thing is that you're a young scientist, you have an idea, it can be a very risky idea, actually they love risk ideas. As long as you fit within, of course, the research area of that program, the program officers have no say. Actually, the program officers, even in the review process, they are not the ones who are deciding. They are just, in the end, playing a little bit with the numbers, but the ones who draw the line is the panel. And actually, I don't have that. I was looking at the NSF website, some statistics to bring in, but I can tell you, there were some programs where they were relying on the program officers deciding, especially the atmospheric sciences. That is dropping right now. The panels are deciding. Now they're relying more, programs that they were actually based on ad hoc reviews only, they're just almost going to zero. And the programs at NSF that they were based solely on the ad hocs and the program officers were saying the ones that had some kind of mission-driven decision making. They were supporting some kind of centers, like the National Center for Atmospheric Research and other centers. And they're dropping. Now, one of the good things about the National Science Foundation, and I think it's unique for this country, I've done a lot of work internationally. I can tell you that almost no country has so much money on fundamental research like what is NSF, although it's still less than some other agencies in NIH. But still, it's way above whatever other countries combined can do on fundamental research. That supports individual researchers from just single PIs all the way to multi-PI proposals. So why NSF? Because you want to have fun doing research and not being guided of what you really want to do. Plus, you are kind of targeting research and education combined. If you don't have the education component, I don't think you have a very strong proposal. And there are no specific agendas. Actually, there are no even hidden agendas to the extent that I can think of. The best proposal wins, and that's not always the case for mission-oriented projects or agencies. It's merit-based. Of course, do we really have a bias system? The answer is no. I mean, we had an interesting discussion the other day. People inherently have their own biases. Even if you try to be unbiased, you have your own biases inside. And even the unconsciousness, there are some psychologists who say the unconsciousness aspect brings the bias up, and without knowing you can bias in different directions. So on that aspect, the merit-based, I think we're not too different than what you would have done for a mission-oriented program. You got to sell your ideas before you go and put it on the paper, on the proposal. You know who you would be the reviewers. I mean, basically these are now programs that we'll call some panelists and we'll call reviewers. You have to be known on what you're proposing. You have to have a needs here. You cannot just go and say something out of the blue because you just wish to do some research. You have to have some background on that. So merit is strong, but don't think that people will just look merely on what you write. They will just look at overall who you are and what you've done and how of course you propose that. And of course, how much is related to what they believe is the right direction to go. Of course, transformative research, we'll talk a little bit later on that, is the thing that now NSF is moving towards. From I think next year, you have to be able to address what your research will do to transform the current way of thinking. That's very, very difficult. Actually, I have a very hard time to even think of how everyone can really transform research and thinking. But that's at least what they're hoping to do. Now, yes, proposals are highly competitive. I put 20%. I agree it's lower than that. Although NSF will tell you it's around there. And it's about 20% for small proposals, probably lower. But if you go to even higher collaborative multi-PI proposals there, it's basically, unless you are, your tenure doesn't depend on the grants. But at that point, yeah, I mean, if you really want to advance your career and you can be a big name and put big proposals, do many people together, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I personally spent like 3 months this year, 3 full months. I mean, I was just working almost, I didn't write a paper on a large proposal. We came just barely to get it funded, but in the end, you just didn't get funded. In the end, you just have a rejected proposal. No matter how good the proposal is, how good the reviews were. Right? Of course, we always try to resubmit. It is very, very competitive. And it's not just the rate. It's not just the rate. It's the fact that you're competing with many other people who are highly skillful and have very great ideas. And I think, in my opinion, the bias that kicks in at that high level. When you basically have 5 best proposals and you're only going to fund 2. I think at that point, I don't think there is a very clear way of merit-based differentiation. So in summary, NSF is the place to submit a proposal if your ideas are basic or do not fit a mission-oriented program. So that's an opportunity that our funding system gives you if you have ideas that you cannot sell really directly, or someone tells you I'm not interested. Well, NSF would hear you. So just some facts here, because I don't, let me give you, because it's very interesting, it comes down to the end in terms of numbers. With this workshop, I decided to go back and see how many proposals I've submitted in the past close to 10 years. 36 proposals. I think this is the greatest number of proposals I've submitted. In NASA, I've submitted only, I don't know, 10, and I got 8 of them funded. Because I know that's the single program I will keep on submitting every 3 years, my proposal. They know me, that particular piece is funded. And I'm not going to go to another program that I know I don't have a chance because it's already taken. The others have sold that idea to that mission. But here, I've submitted 36 proposals. Some of them are submissions, of course. And only 7 have been funded. Right? So it's about 20. I think I got the average of the NSF, what NSF did. 2 were returned. I was slow, that was in the beginning of my career. I didn't check some of the details without review. I think that in one, I kind of tried to fool the system. I used 11 and something on the tables. That time we're strict with them with that. They cut me out just right there. And I tried to argue. There's no discussion. So I learned my lesson. The second one, I think it was returned without review because not because of any of the basic requirements, but because the program officer thought that it doesn't fit the program, and it was for an instrument proposal that he thought that was not related. 27 were declined, and I can tell you some of them were very good and excellent. Once I had a program officer. Usually when you submit a proposal and a program officer calls you, you're just happy because you just hear, hello, Dr. Agnosto, I'm Dr. Sansa from the National Science Foundation. You say, oh, okay, that's great. That's about my proposal. And you sit back, relax, and you hear all the nice things. And he said, actually, that happened twice. He said, unfortunately, I'm giving you bad news. And the reason I called you is because I feel very bad because, you came very close. And he wanted to tell me to resubmit and all this and what to do. You just, it's like getting a cold shower at that point, but still, it was a rejection. And you know what? I resubmitted it and got rejected again. Of course, it's timing as well because it was a field experiment, and that field experiment, of course, was over because I had to cut that particular field experiment. And next year, I had to find another field experiment to fit my proposal. That's what was hard to do. So many times, it just doesn't fit, or you have to wait. Now, I submitted 2 multi-PI, largely interdisciplinary proposals. That was a lot of work, and I don't think it makes sense to focus on that at this level of our discussion. But what I want to close is like, I calculated, I think that I was very optimistic here. You mentioned 2 months of your I said 1 month. I kind of consider some of them being resubmissions, so less of whatever, but I think I was quite optimistic. I calculated about 600K of effort to write a proposal over my career. What did I get as a funding? 1.3. So, well, it's all right. I don't know. I mean, that's something we should say to the upper administration. We probably should put some grant writers to help us write proposals. And it happens in Europe. You don't have to write these big. Right, some people who can help. I mean, you can just leave the idea. But anyway. Now, with the NSF, you got to familiarize yourself with the grant proposal pattern, right? And the standard eligibility and merit review criteria. Now, that's a must. I'm not going to list all this. I'm just going to go through some of the critical ones, but I mean, you got to really understand how they want the proposal formatted. What is that? How you want to? How you would actually lay out the different components of the proposal, etc., etc. But again, every program has also deviations, and some programs specific solicitations deviate or supplement the GPT in terms of age limits. support material they require. For example, last year, or actually this year, I submitted a proposal that had an international collaboration, so we had to put letters, specific letters in that proposal. You don't have to do that for other proposals. We had to define, we had the different page limit. That was typically 15 pages, that was 20 pages, and so on. So you have to be very careful with what they're looking for. There are some specialized eligibility requirements, and that's also, again, you have to be very careful what they're looking for in terms of eligibility. Typically, 80% of the NSF programs have the same, the general GPG, requirements. But if you go to some of the more complex, multi-interdisciplinary programs, they have those specifications. Like there's a call now on hazards, and you got to have 4 or 5 different disciplines specified in order to submit this proposal. If you don't do that, you're just ineligible. Some others include additional merit review criteria, like especially some proposals that require more focus on education. And some include special reporting requirements. Very quickly, this is what you look for when you submit a proposal to NSF. You have the cover page, basically giving the general information about the program, the title, the period, and of the proposal, and the KPIs. You have a project summary that should include the merit and the broader impact. We'll talk a little bit, because that's really the nuts and bolts of the NSF proposal. So the merit and the broader impacts should be included in the project summary. And then a project description that encapsulates basically your research methodology. Again, a proposal to NSF has to have a very clear statements. I don't know, that would be your introduction or your background or the motivating statement. But you got to know what's the state of the art is. Again, you're attacking a problem that's fundamental, and you're basically pushing the envelope in terms of new knowledge, right? So we'll talk a little about that also. But the project description is not just that. You start with the background, you start with your introduction, you have your objectives. Oftentimes, and again, that varies by directorate. Engineering directorate can work with objectives or research questions, but if you are in science or geosciences or any other field, you got to have a hypothesis or hypothesis, several. NSF loves hypotheses. I never use a hypothesis for NASA. But if you don't have a hypothesis, which is falsifiable, and we'll talk a little bit about this, it doesn't work well for NSF. And then you have a technical description of how you're going to address either hypothesis or your research questions. And that has to be realistic, and that's where a proposal can be killed if it is over-ambitious. Do you have the data? Is it really realistic in terms of the budget that you're using? Be careful, and that's something that, although mission-oriented agencies, they love to see that, in other words, matching, and see you bring data, you bring additional support, you bring connection to fields. NSF, actually most programs, I haven't seen a single program to allow matching. So whatever you put in the budget has to reflect the amount of effort that's needed to be able to do the technical aspect, to do the research. If there is a mismatch or it's loosely connected, that is the level where now the budget and budget justification becomes part of the merit review criteria, right? And so really your technical component, your technical description, and the budget are very tight, very strongly connected. You have to be able to even connect that in the description of the work. And then the rest is basically information you need to supply, like current and support, facilities, equipment. This, in the end, now NSF requires 2 additional information. If you have a postdoctoral support, you have to include a mentoring plan. Several of us have some standard description. If any one of you would like to do, we can pass you that level of wording of how we represent things. But you have to have a plan how you're going to mentor the postdoc. And there's a data management plan also. And it again, that shouldn't be something that you just say, I'm going to put data on the web. Once I wrote something, I said the university has specific rules or about data sharing and so on. And I said, the reviewer asked, so what are those rules? Okay, so you have to be very specific about how long it's going to take you to release the data, what would be the formats even that this data would be available to the public. All the information if you were outside and kind of would like to use the data that an NSFPI would produce from this project, the things that you would like to know, you should put them down. Very simple. But if you don't put it, the reviewer may take some points out of that. And in the end, it's the description, the separation between the very good or excellent and good that makes the proposal fundamental.
Could you elaborate on that a little bit? Because obviously, number one, data dissemination is publishing stuff.
Correct.
What else do I want you to say? What's the winning stuff to say?
This is different than the data dissemination. This is more about the data that you have collected to make it available to the public, to other researchers.
Some things would have a lot of that, some would have almost none.
If you don't have data, if your research will not involve generation of new data, you don't have to say much.
Right, if there's only a little bit of data, you can say.
It's less of important. But if you're doing a field experiment, or if you do massive simulations, and these massive simulations are going to produce data that you're going to publish upon, this simulated data or observed data should make them available to the public.
Through the web. Is that
through the web, through some FTP site that you're gonna set up. You have to just explain to them. Maybe if your data are too heavy and it's too costly to do it to the web, should explain that I'm gonna put them on an FTP site, and if people want them there, I can either ship them or put them on a CD. But you have to be explicit how, and also you have to be also explicit about what's the volume of data that you generate. I mean, all of that information needs to be there. It is part of the merit review criteria now, and if it's part of the merit, there will be a question for the reviewers to evaluate that. And if there is a question there, you got to address it appropriately. And it doesn't have to be long. It's just one page of description, but that one page just has to be well laid out. And that's basically one or two. I focused a little bit on the data management plan. So there are existing policies. Actually, existing policy at NSF requires that awardees to share the data within a reasonable length of time. That can be between 6 months to a year. So don't make it like too long. It's gonna reflect about. So you have to describe that, how the proposal will conform with that NSF policy. And it's part of the review. And actually, the data management plan, it is really ties on the broader impacts of your research, because if what you collect can be the basis for someone else to work on and do additional research, that's part of your broader impact in the community. Okay, so proposal preparation. Read the program announcement, the solicitation carefully, mainly because you have to know that you're addressing the program according to the objectives, but also that you know exactly what are the limitations in terms of requirements, or also in terms of additional levels of input or review material that you have to include. I always read the funded projects. I always go and see what are the existing funded projects in this in the NSF website. Usually, wherever the program is underneath somewhere, there's a link to those funded programs. Recently, I submitted. I'm planning to submit a proposal. I had this idea to work on a proposal, and then I looked at those. At that link, and I found a project that was recently funded, just actually this year, that was just there, the same thing. At least the original thing was the same. And I thought, oh, okay, that's great. What do I do? So I contacted the PI of that project, because the title, from the title and just the description they had, I couldn't really make my case. So I contacted the PI, and I said, look, I knew him. I haven't interacted with that PI a lot, but his name was known. So I emailed him and said, look, this is what I want to do. That's what you do. Do you think we'll have any conflict? Can you tell me a little bit more about it? Actually, he sent me his proposal. So he basically replied immediately, send the proposal. He says, look, from what you want to do, it seems that we are not overlapping. On the contrary, we are quite synergistic, because he was doing more of climate, decadal analysis, we're doing more seasonal. So I said, well, okay, great. So I took his reply, and I go to the program office. Until then, I hadn't contacted the program officer at all, because I didn't know what to say. So I now contact the program officer and say, look, this is what I want to submit. I talked to the PI, I'm aware of this proposal, this project. I talked to the PI, and this is what we agreed. This is what we think. And he looked and says, yeah, actually, I think you have no conflict. You can go ahead and submit it. And he gave me some feedback about what I wanted to do. Actually, I was missing a point about this program that I had to address, and I'm trying to address. So that interaction with the program officer, knowing what projects they are funding, what is the level of funding. Typically, they do give you a higher level, upper level, but if you see that all of the proposals are way below what you're asking, or you're asking way below what the medium is, there's somewhere a disconnect to what this program is funding. So that is always good to have in your mind before you start formulating the program. Of course, you always want to address all the proposal review criteria. Usually they're the same for NSF, but some programs have some additional criteria that you really need to know and clearly address them. Because the reviewers, I'm reviewing NSF proposals, so they're asking you explicitly. You read the proposal, you answer specific questions. If I don't see that in the proposal, basically it reflects negative. Describe the broader impacts. That is something that I was writing NSF proposals for a few years. I never really paid too much attention to the broader. I thought the broader impacts just a couple of one paragraph. I throw it in. What is the broad? Then I thought that the merit is the more important thing. And honestly, simply because probably I was writing single investigator proposals, or in the past it wasn't that critical. I don't know. But now, the broader impact is very important. And the broader impacts is not just, I would actually have a list of broader impacts, but for one of the proposals submitted, it was a large proposal. So I had like probably 3/4 of a page long broader impacts. I thought it was a lot. So I gave my proposal to someone to kind of give me some feedback. He says, you know, I've been reading. I'm reviewing proposals for NSF for this scale, these large proposals. Most of the broader impacts I see is at least 2 pages long. So if you are to ask for $3.5 million from NSF, you got to put at least 2 pages of broader impacts. I mean, yeah, they are funding fundamental research, but you got to know that this work will actually impact way more than 3/4 of a page of people, students, society, etc., etc. If you don't make it at least a page and a half, don't even bother. So in fact, I made it a page and a half. Still didn't get it done.
few pages.
Broader impacts is more, and you will see and I have been I have received comments on the broader impacts in the past, and I'm improving because I started putting more emphasis on that, and I think it's critical for NSF as well. So, what are the NSF review criteria? These are the things that the number one thing that we're asked to answer when we're reviewing a proposal. What is the intellectual merit? Of course, there's a list of things about intellectual merit for the proposal, and what are the broader impacts of that activity. Right. Now, there's another aspect about transformative research statement. I've started including a transformative research statement. Still not required, but I think from next year, it's going to be a requirement. So, intellectual merits. I mean, this is things that you get from NSF website. That's what you should know before you submit a proposal, right? You can go one by one, but what I want to do is to give you my interpretation in the next slide. But what reviewers are asked are how important is the activity to advancing knowledge within our approach fields, how qualified is the proposer or team. That's always, probably most of us are getting a good mark, because if they want to kill a proposal, they don't have to kill it on that level. But that's probably to get rid of some of the unknown researchers. I think most of the people in this room are well qualified to address the topic of your subject of yours. What was the quality of prior work? This is typically important for clearly for people who already have or had NSF proposals, but also if you put background research, even if you don't have a prior NSF proposal, and you show some background information, that will definitely fare a lot in this review process. For young investigators, this may be may not, or some reviewers may not address it fully. And again, to what extent, and that's new again, does this activity suggest and explore creative, original, and potentially transformative concepts? So you can see it's all about innovation, it's all about new knowledge, it's all about whether you put something there that someone else may have not thought about and thinks, hey, this is a great idea. That's when you really get to the store, to the how well conceived, of course, and organized is the activity. That is about clearly the research plan, and of course we always have to be careful not to oversell, not to overcommit, or not to show that we haven't really thought clearly about the research involvement. And is there sufficient access to resources? For example, you're submitting a proposal to do a major field experiment, but you have no experimental, no actually instruments to support this, or the university cannot support that. You cannot just go and say, I'm going to do an experiment. You may wish to do an experiment, but if you don't have the experimental resources, you just cannot do it. And the broader impacts. I think that if I were to translate that, is about training students, bringing undergraduate, primarily undergraduate students in the research mode. How many students, how many graduate or undergraduate students your research will train? The numbers here matters. Right? Numbers here matter a lot. Underrepresented groups. Are you going to involve? What are you going to do? I mean, bringing these aspects now in clear. It doesn't have to overshoot, because if your merit is there and people like your proposal, what you need with the broader impacts is to show how broad of a base you're going to build to really outreach and support that activity. So students, educational activities, underrepresented groups, enhancing the infrastructure that will actually further support future research. And of course, dissemination of your results. You know, be creative about this. It's not just going to a conference. Sometimes, for example, creating, if you have collaborators, or they love now international work. So if you're dealing with international, like Africa, I mean, how are you going to how are you going to outreach to those people? I mean, how are you going to change their lives by doing what you're doing? And of course, the net outcome is what are the broader benefits to society. If you do something about, I don't know, climate. Is your climate research going to help someone living in a farmer in Ethiopia? Well, if it is, you have to say how. And also not just how. You have to include effort to reach out to that person. If you have those items there, I believe, and again, it doesn't need to be an oversell. You don't have to cover all the different aspects, but you have to cover enough for a reviewer to say, okay, this is a great proposal, great idea, and is addressing students, and will train students. Well, that's great. I think people will be fun. Of course, I have to say, the merit is what drives the funding of a particular proposal, but all the others is what makes two strong proposals, one get funded, the other being just with the sweetness of getting very good and excellent marks. So here's my interpretation. What makes a good project proposal of all that? The proposed project, number one, is worthwhile and realistic. The hypothesis, if you use hypothesis, is falsifiable. That's very important. And not obvious. I've gotten review comments saying, yeah, I mean, what you're saying, I agree. That your proposal is basically out. And the research methodology is well planned and innovative. Now, translating this into writing a proposal is not an easy task, and I don't think anyone has really the golden way of telling you that your proposal is worthwhile. But you should always ask yourself, or someone outside your group, can you evaluate my proposal according to those things? That's how at least I evaluate it. So, is it worthwhile to do this project? Why should I spend money on this project? Now, is it realistic? Right? I mean, realistic in terms of the budgets and the time frame and the resources that this production is. I mean, is that a hypothesis that really can be falsifiable or are based on the data that will be collected? Or not? The same thing can go, of course, into the research questions. And the not obvious connects, of course, with the worthwhile project, because is it something that you proposed that I would have thought and the majority of probably the current state of the art has supported already, or is enough evidence that doesn't make that an interesting hypothesis? And of course, the well-planned and innovative has to do with your own research, right? I mean, clearly you should be in the forefront of that research topic. You should have innovative ideas of how you go forward. It's not just enough to come with a great idea, but to have proven that you have enough, first of all, background and the way you plan to proceed is innovative. And here is like a slight interpretation in terms of sentences. My advisor told me that once, and I've seen it in several places. A not obvious proposal concept is the one that a reviewer will say, I wish I had thought about. Oh yeah, that's great. A worthwhile project is one that benefits undergraduate, graduate education, improves student opportunities to learn through research, brings new concepts into the classroom, outreach to a vulnerable society, improve human life, etc. Economic, all the aspects related to progress for humankind. A realistic project is the one that can be accomplished within the time frame and available resources. Be careful, not matching. You can, even if you have matching, and we all have matching to some extent, you have to make the proposal being realistic within the frame of what you request. It can really kill your proposal if you think that you have some couple of more students from the school and the reviewer looks at this and says, well, what? It cannot be done with the resources that this guy says. It's done. It's going to take, even if it's not killed at the review level, the program officer at that point has the right to say this project is unrealistic. Finally, an innovative research plan is the one that is based on that advances current state of the art. So you have to know what the current state of the art is and how you're going to advance that with techniques that are at or above that state of the art. Finally, a proposal needs to be written in sufficient detail to allow reviewers to understand what the project hopes to accomplish. That's more of really the writing of your proposal, the style of writing a proposal. So, what are the proposal hypotheses and objectives clearly? If the project personnel has the necessary expertise to accomplish the goals and objectives, that comes to your own background research and, of course, your CVs and other work with that. And the potential of the project to improve undergraduate education. I keep on emphasizing on the education because really, if you don't have a strong educational component in an NSF proposal nowadays, you don't have a strong proposal, period. And the impact and cost effectiveness of the project. Clearly, of course, you want to do things at the lowest cost and to sell to the NSF and say, with that money, you can get the best that you can. Still, the program officer has a limited budget and they want to show in the end that they have achieved X number of projects that are going to save the lives, going to impact millions of people, right? In the end, it's counting in terms of how many people you impact, how many lives you save and all this. So what is the impact of your research and how much does it cost? So a $500,000 project, it impacts 50 million people in Africa. I think you have good chances to get funded. But as long as you have addressed the merit and the outcome. And finally, the evaluation and dissemination plans. Dissemination plans we talked about. Evaluation is another thing that you have to have a way to evaluate what you do. I didn't used to include an evaluation plan in my previous proposals. Now, in the past several years, I've seen this happening more often. People are putting even backup plans if things are not really working well or things are not moving along that way. You have to be able to inform the reviewers that you are able to evaluate the steps you're making and update your methodology towards whatever addressing your objective. Especially if you are asking for lots of money. I mean, but the end, NSF proposals, and I have lots of fun more fun working on NSF projects than with my NASA project. My NASA projects are always on the edge to get my products, talk to the program officer every almost 6 months and report and things. And we were interacting a lot. So once we had actually a project, when we kicked off the project, we got all together, and the program officer says, we all know that we promise something and we keep on, then we go and we do whatever we want. So I'll tell you what we want. And let's get together and decide how we're going to coordinate. And we had to coordinate. We funded 20 PIs. You guys have to work together. At the NSF grant, I never really had to work with anyone but the people that I submitted my proposal to, with. And honestly, if the direction I was taking was not working, I was free to take another direction and still be within my funding requirements. So have fun, really, doing NSF work. That's all.
Thank you, man.